Welcome to the Storyboards Creativecast. I'm Jen Clark-Hall, and in each episode I'll be chatting to inspirational people working in the creative industries who will share their career stories and advice. If you want to know more about creative careers, are thinking about starting up a creative business, or just want something interesting to listen to for half an hour, this is the podcast for you. Today we're talking with Julia Patton, an illustrator, designer and creative writer. Welcome to the podcast, Julia. It's great to be talking with you today. And first off, I want to ask you, you've had quite a diverse work life in that you don't just have one prescribed role. So I'd love you to tell us more about that.
Hi, Jen. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, a creative. Goodness, what does that involve? I suppose my pathway as a creative started when I was very small. I was given a package when I was very little from a dear aunt with lots of art materials in to keep me quiet because I was always a busy child, and it did the trick. And I always knew I wanted to follow that pathway. So at school, I followed my GCSE pathway. Then I went off to art college and got my undergraduate. I set up a card designing business while I was at university. And then just after university, I went to work at Manchester University as a lecturer. And that was great fun. So already straight out of education, I had these two different roles that I was sort of balancing. And I really liked the duality of those roles. And little did I know that, 10, 20 years down the line, that duality would be multifold. And one of the reasons that, I've kept myself employed and kept myself busy and interested is to have lots of different interests in different places. Since then, I have done all kinds of random things. I've built film sets for Tim Burton. I have where I've made aprons for Channel 4 sumo wrestling Japanese programs. As I say, greeting cards, wrapping paper. But it wasn't really until I went back to do my master's at Edinburgh University that the worlds of art and literature, words and pictures collided. And then I found my calling. Before, what I was doing was just really creating aesthetically beautiful things. But once form and function came together and I could create beautiful things with meaning, I was completely captivated. So I started illustrating children's picture books and realized the huge responsibility that came with that, and was captivated by it, all of the nuances that came with that. And then I had some stories that sort of crept up and were circling around. And one of my mentors said to me, a few years after I graduated, she said, "Why don't you write?" And I said, "I don't know if I can write." She said, "Have you tried?" And I said, "No." So I tried. And yeah, here I am writing books now. And then on top of that, I have a lecturing role at Sunderland University, which really fulfills me. That mentoring role, making somebody the best that they can be, really fulfills me to see help them join the dots and then see them stratospherically in world domination. It's really lovely to see them succeed.
Do you feel like you've got a good balance between being able to do the things that you're passionate about in terms of your own creativity, as well as helping other people fulfill their own potential?
Not at all, no. I think as a creative, that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have. Your aspirations and the reality and all the things you love to do, trying to find that elusive work balance is always the thing that I find the most difficult. I always want to say yes to everything. The next project that's around the corner is always much more exciting than something you've already done, and especially if it's something in an area you've not worked in before. I'm currently doing packaging design for a company in America, and I haven't done anything like that before. So it was super exciting. And I said yes to it without really thinking about how much time it would take out of my book work and my other work. So it's completely dominating me right now. And one of the things I'm like, maybe I should have said, I'll think about it. But
yeah. And did they get in touch with you? You get too excited for these things.
Yeah.
Well, like you say, I think when you're a creative person and you've got so many things going on, you just want to say yes to things because you never know what it might bring.
Yeah, and it's not sensible. I mean, professionally speaking, I give out advice to my students all the time that I just do not take myself. Make time for yourself, take proper breaks, don't say yes to everything straight away. Make sure that and I don't take any of that advice myself. I'm like a giddy teenager. I'll just go, yes, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that. And then magically, somehow it always gets done. And it always makes me happy looking back on the things that I've, tackled and achieved. It always makes for a very good dinner time story.
Well, it keeps you busy and I guess it keeps you out of mischief.
All the disasters, yeah, all the things that have gone wrong that you cobbled together with sellotape at the last minute that nobody sees.
Yeah, I remember pulling a few all-nighters before to get things done, and it gets harder as you get older, especially when you've got little kids running around. So because you've got a lot of different roles and a lot of different things going on, do you feel like they come together to complement each other?
Yes, absolutely. The private work, my freelance work, feeds directly to my students. I can give them industry information, which is completely vital to them. I've got them in contact with my contacts. I can see that the way the industry's going. I can see what commissioning editors want, how acquisitions work to make sure that their portfolio is not just beautiful, but, they're actually going to get a viable career and revenue out of what they're producing. And, ask them why they're doing it and who they're doing it for. And I think it makes them a lot more rounded as well.
Because the degree you lecture on, that's illustration.
Yes, illustration and design, the BA and the master's course at Sunderland, which has sort of over the last year undergone a really big structural change. We're really trying to implement the professional practice of industry facing. If I was a student now, that's where I'd want to be, because this course is brand new, fresh, exciting. We've got tutors on there that are working professionals that are giving invaluable input to the students. It's absolutely sensational content, and the support from the management to be able to adapt and apply that in a really exciting, vibrant way is to me, as not only a creative but as a lecturer, is super exciting to see the response from the students in such a short space of time.
And they'll be really receptive to the fact that you're working so hard in order to make their skills and to the point where they're really employable. And they're really sought after, because I know when I came out of university, it was the financial crash in 2008 and there were no jobs, and it was such a terrible time to be graduating. I think that's one of the key things that a lot of students go into university now, if they decide to go to university in the first place, is what am I going to get at the end of this 3 years? Am I going to have a job? Because if they don't, I think that's a huge factor, because they're spending so much money on it as well.
So much money now. And, could you compare the money they're spending now on education to the experience they were getting when you were paying £3,500 a year? Is that comparable? But hopefully what we're doing now is we've brought all these fresh new ideas and packaged them all together. It's just been all passed off as well. So it's
brilliant.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and my colleagues are just exceptional. My line managers are exceptional. I feel in such a safe environment to be able to try new things and experiment with experiences from my own freelance life, to give them real life scenarios and talk to them not only just as an academic, but as a community editor. Yeah,
I think that's really important in any stage of design for students, even from school age, that they have someone who is practicing what they're teaching, because it's so easy to get really stale at school with not practicing what you preach, basically.
and give them life scenarios of where I've done something, especially at the moment. What I'm teaching them is sort of creative etiquette, as you would call it. Don't arrive late to class, because if this was a creative meeting, you'd be in trouble. You'd have to, and don't be disrespectful to your fellow students, because if you were in a creative meeting and you're on your telephone texting, you'd be out the door. And all of these lessons that I'm sharing with them are from real life experiences.
Yeah. Do they seem quite receptive to that? Do they respect that?
Coming from that angle, it's quite easy to say, get off your phone, because if this was a creative meeting, you'd be asked to step outside. From a sort of disciplinarian as an academic, it's very difficult to say to an 18, 19, 20 odd year old, get off your phone, because they'd say no.
Yeah.
But as a real life scenario, I can say, and I can also go through and explain to them all the silly things that I've done or I've experienced that have ended up biting me on the backside, and why it did and what impact it had, and how to avoid those traps. So not only are they learning, the modules and the projects and, all the technical digital skills they need, hopefully they will come out with a much more rounded view of a creative attitude and behavior, professional practice.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, you can give the university and the degree course a plug at the end of the podcast. We'll give you some time to give out some more information, because I mean, illustration is something I find extremely fascinating, and I'd love to be able to bring to life characters that not just I think of, or scenery that someone else thinks of. So one of the questions I was going to ask you later on, but I'll ask it now because it seems to fit in quite nicely, was how do you translate somebody else's words or ideas and pictures into something that you can deliver that sort of evokes those images and those feelings and those emotions that they want to deliver through their work, through their book? Because that must be a really tricky, intricate thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's the most difficult part of our job. The ultimate role of an illustrator is to sort of illuminate the unspoken and interpret the magical. To be a successful illustrator, you have to fill in the gaps, the space, the quiet. But when I'm given somebody else's text to illustrate, we have to sort of go back a little bit, because I have a portfolio of work that I do in my particular style. I give that to my agent, and they send that out into the universe, and publishing houses that have a text on their books waiting will see my work, and they'll go, that's a perfect fit for that. So they make that connection, they make that relationship. So somebody there, the art director or the commissioning editor, publisher, has already seen threads that are overlapping there. So I won't usually get to choose who I would work with. And the same with the author. It's the publishing house's job. And they fit us together. And usually it's a very, very, very good fit.
They kind of do that consultation process a little bit for you.
Yeah. And they've sort of done an editing process already. There might have been 5, 10, or 100 different people that they were looking at to illuminate this text. And, it might be that I'm given a sample. They might say to me, okay, you've got a week. We're going to pay you X amount. Can you give us a few character samples for this particular text? Right. And I will go away and do that. And they will either say yes or no. There's plenty of jobs that I've got and plenty that I've not got. And it's one of those things where it isn't personal. It is just the flavor of what they're looking for. They either love you or it's not the right fit. And it's got nothing to do with you personally. So the jobs you lose, it's just onwards, on to the next thing. And then you usually find you've got a really big affinity with the author, because they've already done quite a lot of work behind the scenes. I've had a couple of people in the past that I've worked for, and the relationship has been spectacular. And we've created something bigger and better than any single party could have ever imagined. And it's gone on to have not only great friendships, but wonderful working relationships. It's a very different job illustrating for somebody else that it is illustrating your own work as well.
Yeah, I mean, you must find it obviously a little bit easier because you've got pictures in your minds as you're writing things.
I find more pressure working for other people because I don't want to let them down.
Yeah.
I try to sort of go above and beyond their expectations to deliver something that they didn't know that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, delivering them that where they're delighted is everything I need. Even if I didn't get paid, that would tick all my boxes.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with any kind of setbacks that you have? So you say, sometimes it's just not the right fit, and then not, and whatever it is it isn't quite right for the book, or with other professional setbacks. How do you deal with that and try not to take it so personally?
I think because the speed and the what would you call it? The not disposable, but the speed in which we're working. You do not really have time to sit and dwell on it. Oh, I didn't get that job, or because something else has come in, or you've got 2 or 3 other things booked up. And it literally is, when I finish a book, it's done, dusted, next day onto something else. And I usually don't give it much thought at all, because you're just straight on to the next job. I would love to have the time to be indulgent enough to sit there feeling sorry for myself. And actually, usually, it's just the system. It really isn't you. I've seen many of my colleagues, actually quite a few of us, all going for the same job, all wanting the same job, all doing samples for it. And we eventually found out who's got it. And then you sort of disseminate the process and who's done what and how they've done it. And it's very clear that they were the right fit. So even if you don't get it, you understand. And I would have chosen that person to do that work as well. It sort of just makes common sense. It's the visual jigsaw pieces.
So what keeps you motivated and passionate about what you do in terms of your writing, your illustration, but also your lecturing and your teaching and the academic side of things?
I think we would call that a visual magpie. To sit inside my studio, my travels. I'm mad on Japanese culture, architecture, food. I love growing giant botanicals. I love cooking. There's a million one things I'm interested in. I love sewing. I love making ceramics. I make books. There's a million things that I do, and all of those things filter down, and I collect them into books, hundreds and hundreds of little books filled with seedlings that they just sit here and wait until I have a quiet moment, and then I'll dip in and go, okay, oh, that's something I can work on. So I have lots of these books, and they are all alphabetized, so I can take these to an art director or a commissioning editor, and they'll go, okay, what have you got that's new? And I'll go, well, what do you want? And they were like, have you got any bears? So I'll go to B and go, yeah, I've got bears, and I've got bees, and I've got bottoms, and they become seedlings that eventually become much bigger projects. I have one on my shelf, and it's probably got maybe 20 to 30 different seedlings for book pitches inside there. And I'm constantly writing ideas. When I hear conversations or look at things, I write in titles as well. So when I'm thinking of a story, I will conceive the title, and the essence of what the story is going to be about then comes to me, and I will write down the notes and maybe the main character, and then it gets filled in from there. But it's just constant. It's every single day. And when I'm trying not to, it still happens. And I file them all away, so I know that they're all here, but I don't have to feel pressured to do anything with it.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is I've asked everyone so far, what do you do to deal with creative block? But I'm assuming that's maybe one of the things that you do is you just draw, and then like you've got this visual cupboard that you can put it in, and it's there, and you can go back to it to maybe use as inspiration for something else. But I mean, is there anything else you do that helps you when you're just not feeling particularly creative and you're under that time pressure to produce something?
It's really interesting because I've listened to all of your other podcasts that I was really, really inspired by. And I heard you ask the question to these different creatives, and their response was really interesting to me. And I listened to my students talk to me about creative blocks and, just not feeling it, or not in the mood, or, not inspired. And it just doesn't have a resonance with me. I don't understand. I'm bursting. I must be exhausting to work with and live with, because I'm just like, oh, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do that. And, if we've not got enough pens, how about we go and make some? We could do this. And I just must be like a very annoying puppy, because I'm bursting with energy and enthusiasm to the point where I even drive myself bonkers. So a creative block, I would be cooking, or I would be planting, and then whilst I'm planting, I'd be drawing the beautiful plant that I've got. I'm completely obsessed with huge, great big architectural plants, and then they become sculptures to draw. And there isn't anywhere that I look that I can't find a seedling of something to play with.
Well, that's really interesting, because it sounds a bit like I get I get creative block in the sense that I don't feel confident, or I feel like I'm gonna fail at something, and so I don't want to try and do something. That's my block a little bit, I think.
That's really interesting.
At the same time, what you say is that you see things everywhere, and you're really excited, and you've got all these ideas whirring around in your head, and it feels like sometimes that's what's in my head. I feel like it's a television set that you're constantly flicking through the channels, and I can't settle on something long enough to focus on it. And I think, there's a duality to that, isn't there? That it's not necessarily creative blocks. Sometimes you've just got so much going on, you're not sure what to stop at.
And that's where I find this filing system, whether it's visual or virtual, I find that really interesting, because I can have them there and I can plant them there, and then they can stay there. But I also have I don't have a filter inside of me that sits there and worries about, well, I'll try that, but it won't work. Or if I try that, it's not going to. There's never been a time in my life when I've ever thought that I'm going to get judged for something that I've done that won't work, or hasn't worked out how I planned it. I just tend to do it and worry about it later. And actually what happens now is I don't even worry about it later. It's never been on my radar that if I get any feedback or development feedback from anywhere, it's something that I can work on and fix. But it would never cross my mind that it was a personal criticism or something that I'd done wrong. It's just an opportunity to do something better, which I can't get enough of. So failure to me is not trying and failing. Failure to me is not trying.
Do you think that's come from the way you came up through school and college and university, and the way you were nurtured as a younger person when you were trying to be creative?
Yeah, I think my sister was pure academic. She won every prize in school. So, she was 2 years older than me. So in school, and her and I are complete opposites. She was very quiet and, shy and purely academic. And I was the captain of every team, and I was in the choir and sports and art club and head girl. And I was like, come on, everybody, come join in the fun. And, she was the complete opposite. Whereas I didn't have any expectations following her, even though sometimes, my teachers were disappointed that I wasn't another one of her. But I didn't feel any pressure to be anybody else but myself. And I had complete freedom from my parents to be whatever I wanted to be. And I always felt this sense of knowing and understanding what made me happy. And it was colouring and cutting and sticking and creating little things that I sent out to people. And it's always been the thing that has, if I wasn't making a career in it, I would still be doing it because it still makes me happy.
And I think that's what what everyone has said when I've been interviewing them is, they're content with what they're doing. They're happy with what they're doing. If they weren't content and happy, then they would be doing something else. And they would be, whatever, they would find that thing that makes them happy. And again, it's a conversation I've had so many times before, that with kids, we often say, what do you want to be when you're older? Prescribing them into this box already. And it's not what makes you happy? What's going to make you happy tomorrow? What's going to make you happy next week? What's going to make you happy in 5 years' time?
I ask that question a lot, actually, to my students. Two things: what are you really good at, and what do you enjoy doing? And if we can somehow squish that together, then
the holy grail.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not somebody also that has any viability based on how much money I make. I can get as much enjoyment about making a handmade greeting card for somebody than signing a six-figure deal for an American company. Those things have no weight for me whatsoever. If I love it, I love it. I can't wait to get back to going to a night ceramic class. Those things make me ridiculously happy. My husband calls it clay play. And I'm like, no, darling, it's very serious. This is, I'm doing an A-level in art. And he's like, no, you're going off to play clay.
Have you been watching the Great Pottery Throwdown as well?
Oh, I'm just delighted. I'm delighted to see programs on stitching, because my undergraduate was in embroidery design, which was a very fine art based course. So I just used to make beautiful things. How I got a way to justify a degree in embroidery and didn't actually stitch anything is beyond me. But I learned about ceramics there, and mark making, and aesthetics. And it's those worlds and the worlds of illustration now, words and pictures, have all merged together.
So your really holistic approach, or a holistic journey that you've been on, where you've done a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's all come together to be able to inform what you're doing now. And
I think that's why I find working with students and being a mentor, like I've had a mentor, is really rewarding, because I've had people that have really guided me and cared for me and wanted the very best for me, and have illuminated my seedlings and joined the dots to make me much more successful. And it's a real gift to be able to do that with my students. And I genuinely care about them. The last year of teaching at the university has been, the majority of it's been pastoral, naturally. But when you have that affinity with a student and you know them inside and out, I can connect them with things that they love. But, when they're unhappy and disconnected and disengaged, it's really difficult to help them in any way, shape and form. So pastoral is the first place that I start. And especially being online, we've developed brand new hybrid, super singing, dancing, technical things over the last year I didn't even know I was capable of. But getting back into the studio last week, what we accomplished in 4 hours was possibly 4 to 6 weeks work.
Wow.
It was supercharged. By the end of the day, I couldn't even speak. It was like I'd been speed dating. It was like we got so much. And, we'd turned weeks and weeks of very slow, poor communication around. And it was really clear to see what actually didn't work online. There are many benefits to it. I sit here in my studio 6 days a week, working just online. All my clients, all my publishers and agents are in America, which is super cool, actually, because I have this imaginary scenario where I actually live in the future.
So 5 hours ahead of everyone else.
I really like that, because I can get up in the morning and be like, I don't even have to start work yet for America, because they haven't even woken up. I'm in the future. So it's a very different story from working with Korea, though, because they're always chasing my tail, and no matter what I do, I'm still behind.
No, it must be quite strange. Like I've got a brother in Australia and cousins in America, and we've been at one point trying to do a Zoom all together, and I was like, right, how is this going to work? We're 9 hours, 10 hours behind Australia. We're 5 hours ahead of America, and then there's us in the middle. Someone's going to have to get up really early or stay up really late, and it just, the logistics of it is almost impossible. But I made a
very big mistake once working with America and Korea. And even when I was asleep, there was somebody, it didn't work at all. The mistake I've made over my career that I try not to repeat have been I mean, some of them are just ridiculously laughable, but I do share them with my students to sort of make them realize that, you know, on the outside it might look like this, that, or the other, but actually the nuts and bolts and behind the scenes, the tears, the gnashing of the teeth, and, you know, the smiling and the waving like Madagascar penguins when you're actually just panicking, there's an awful lot of that goes on as well. We're actually trying to monetize one of the projects that we're working on to make them understand deadlines. So if I say I want a particular project handed in at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, and I'm going to pay them, you know, £10,000 to do it, for every hour that you're late, you're losing £1,000. I mean, my colleague that I work with at university, he does a lot of freelance work for BBC and Netflix and all kinds of Disney, and he's literally been in those scenarios where if you're late, we start deducting money.
That's a really good lesson to learn.
Yeah, and huge, not just sort of academic. If you hand your paper in late, you're going to get a mark less. No, you might not only lose your fee for the project, they won't work with you again.
Yeah, and it goes as a black mark against your name, doesn't it, as well, because you're not presenting that professional side.
Yeah, and there's only so many excuses you can hear from students or clients that the dog's eaten the cat that ate my homework, that had the, you know, that fell down the stairs, that the wardrobe fell on, that was struck by lightning by my cousin's Rottweiler. There are I mean, you could write a really hilarious book of all the excuses. And that was one of the things we had a conversation about early on. It was like, I don't really mind what the problem is. Just tell me the truth and we can fix it.
Yeah.
Problems happen all the time. I've had all kinds of problems myself. But if you go to a client or a publisher and tell them the truth, there's usually a way we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Start telling me that you've broken your leg and, you know, your hamster's not doing very well, and
nothing's insurmountable.
Yeah. I mean, usually some of those things do happen, but yeah, tell me before so you fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So what's had to change then for you over the last kind of 13, 14 months with the pandemic? Has that affected, it's obviously affected the lecturing work and the work at university, because it's, you know, it's had to become all online, and there's, like you say, none of that face-to-face contact. But what about the freelance side of things? How's that affected it?
Publishing world in a nutshell over the last, the beginning of the pandemic, things, you know, acquisitions have slowed down a little, but actually people have been more desperate for books, for more hands-on time, for more going back to traditional values. They want to sit down with reading books. They've had the time to do it. They usually had two parents around to do it. So actually, you know, there's always the silver lining. There's always the, you know, and there has been a real resurgence in things like they want much more handmade, hand-created artwork as a reflection of that, which is a really interesting trend. There's a lot more trends and acquisitions for more interactive books, more activity books. I've been asked to provide artwork for huge amount of toys and games and jigsaws and puzzles, and, you know, educational platforms have been reaching out. People have just been desperate for activities to engage with each other with. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, you know, picture books were maybe just a bedtime scenario or a teaching tool within a school. Now that they've been quite desperate. But also there's been a trend for literary themes, which they're always affected by world news, world politics. So recently, over the last year or two, I've been asked for subject matters concerning kindship and friendship and inclusivity and diversity and being yourself and celebrating yourself and looking after yourself. The statistics around childhood anxiety and worries, and will I fit in, and language barriers, you know, mm-hmm. all of those things filter down to me. And those are the stories that I have to create, because they're the stories that people need. I was always told as an author, you have to tell the story that you know and that somebody might need. There's a really interesting analogy about a window. When you're an author and an illustrator, you create two sides to your world. There's a window that you can look out and create an environment that you can imagine that somebody else would be inspired by. But when the sunlight hits that window at a particular time, it blocks out that, and it just becomes a reflection, it becomes a mirror. And it's really important for you to see yourself inside that world. So now I'm creating worlds for where people who have been marginalized or underrepresented, they feel that they can exist in. So that's super important to me. I'm writing a new book at the moment called The Fixer of Broken Things. And she's a very busy, industrious young girl who fixes everything for everybody else, big, small. She's the best fixer there is. And then she just happens to find something quite small and quite quiet inside of her that she can't fix. And she has to do something really, really brave. And she has to speak up and ask for help for the first time. I hadn't really realized it at the time when I'd written the narrative, maybe about a year and a half ago, how self-autobiographical it was. And the tagline is, now we've spoken, we can easily fix what is broken. So I'm working on that at the moment and pouring my entire essence into it. It's so fulfilling and so important. And I'm sure if I felt like that, then there must be a squillion other little people out there that might feel the same.
Yeah. I was reading your number 7 Evergreen Street book yesterday with Hugo, and he loved it, and he loved all the pictures. And what I found really interesting, and this is I find this a lot when I read the books to the kids, that the first time of reading it, it's very superficial. You sort of go through the words and you look at the pictures, and every time you read it thereafter, you see something else, and you sort of peel away another layer of what's underneath the meaning of certain words or certain sentences or certain imagery. And with the number 7 Evergreen Street book, I was looking at it and I was thinking, gosh, I don't know what your intention was, but there's a lot of background information in there about community and being part of a bigger picture, and being part of this multicultural picture as well, because within that there's lots of different ethnicities, lots of different cultures, and lots of different I guess traditions probably coming in there as well. And it was really interesting. And I mean, Hugo's probably oblivious to a lot of that at the minute, which in a way is a good thing, because he doesn't notice the differences.
Every one of those characters in Number Evergreen Street are my friends and my colleagues. And they're dotted all over the world. So when I eventually send them the book and they arrive and they can see themselves, it's been quite amusing for them to go, oh gosh, that's me. And the storybook came from the fact that we had to move out from our house that we loved and our friends and the area that we lived. So all that heart comes from my feelings and my experiences. And like I said, if I felt like that, then there must be other people too. They become not only, they become sort of teaching tools and therapy tools and soothing tools, as well as pretty things to look at. Has Hugo found the kittens yet?
Oh, the kittens. Oh, we saw the cat, but
well, there's an underlying love story that you have to go back and find, and then there are kittens.
Oh, well, we'll have to look for the kittens. I'm assuming they're not there in the beginning, but they're there at the end.
I really like placing these Easter eggs inside of my books, and they're quite hidden away sometimes. I was really inspired by Richard Scarry and people like that, and I used to pore over the illustrations 1,000 times to see something. Where is Lowly Worm, and has he changed his hat, and is there a different feather in there, and how many buttons does he now have on a different cardigan? It just used to hours and hours poring over the details.
Yeah, Hugo, he is quite perceptive in that he loves spot the difference. So if there's something different about a character, he will tend to spot that. But I'll have to go back and look at the kittens. That's like the duck in the Usborne books. I don't know if you remember the Apple Tree Farm books. It's like on every page he spots the duck. He loves that. Yeah. So with having such a diverse journey, and I'm hoping you're nowhere near the end of this journey yet, because it's, you know, it's like you've got so many things going on and so many ideas going through. What's been the thing so far that you've been most proud of?
I mean, there have been a few career highlights of working with, you know, Julia Donaldson, the Gruffalo, doing the BBC Children in Need book that we raised millions. And, you know, I've just worked on a book with Samantha Berger, who writes for Sesame Street. And there's been those kind of career highlights. But the one thing that I'm most proud of is seeing students that I've helped overcome and gain their confidence and help them with their skill sets, and then go off really happily into the world being super creative, creatives themselves. But even not that, I see them then giving back to other people. It is like, I think I should be singing the Circle of Life here or something, or holding up a small lion, or I mean, and those things, and building relationships that are really long-standing. Every year, the whole of the children's publishing world comes together in Italy, in Bologna, which is an exceptionally beautiful city. With, let's not talk about the pizza, the prosecco, or the pasta. I mean, that's just sidebar. And we all get together. So if I haven't seen my publisher for a year, or my agent for a year, it's just a joyous celebration of all these amazing relationships that we've built. I might speak to my art director 20, 30 times a day. And the relationships that you build, you know, I know their families, I know the ins and outs of everything. And, you know, some of these, you become really close to these people, and with, you know, past students as well. But to see them passing what they know on and encouraging other people, the way that I've been looked after and encouraged by my mentors, seeing them doing it is just, it makes me ridiculously happy.
Do you think would that be one of the best things about what you do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. And knowing that my mentors have spent lots of time and effort with me, but it's because they've been cared for by other people as well. I mean, the children's picture book world is very caring and inclusive. You can go on to social media and see all kinds of cruelty in every way, shape, and form of industry. But particularly in my world, we are very, very supportive of people and of brand new talent and brand new voices. And we care for each other very much, which is, it's such a refreshing place to live. You know, I work every day with talking frogs and, you know, trees that sing, and it is quite a lovely place to be. Sometimes the world's a scary, dark place.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to hear as well, because, you know, coming up through the creative route, you do hear a lot about how cutthroat it can be and how competitive it can be. And for people who aren't naturally competitive, who don't have that kind of gene within them to you know, elbow people out the way just so they can get ahead, it's a scary place, you know. And it's nice to know that there are safe places.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important roles that I've taken on board is not necessarily to make you a better creative. It makes you a person that believes in your creative juices, make you believe that you can do it. It's very rare I've taught somebody something magical that's transformed their world, but quite often I've given people the space and the time to realize that they are fabulous, and a little bit of encouragement and building somebody's confidence can join those dots without anybody doing anything else. All they need is a little bit of faith in themselves, and a bit of a shove every now and again, Jen, a little bit of a shove.
Yeah, you do need to have someone there to give you a bit of a kick over the precipice if you're just teetering on the edge and you know there's something great over there, but you just don't.
A bit of a shove. A gentle, safe shove. Yeah. I had some amazing tutors, and was really inspired by the people that are my mentors and still my mentors. You know, I have a collection of creatives around me, and if there's something I can't figure out, I wouldn't think twice of reaching out to them, and they do the same with me. So even my contemporaries, we might be vying for the same job, but we're so, we look after each other so well. My digital skills aren't amazing, so I've got my friend Ginge, who I would go to and ask him to help me with this or that, and he would come to me and ask me for help, vice versa. And it's, there's enough space in the universe for us all. There's no competition in that respect.
That's something else I was really interested in that, again, because I'm at that stage in parenting where I'm still reading a lot of children's books with a lot of illustrations, because my youngest, he's only 4, is how those illustrations actually come together. Because I'm assuming like it's I guess the logistics of how they come. Do they start off as a sketch and then do you like hand paint or hand illustrate or hand color, or do they get translated into a digital image?
Well,
it all seems like magic to me.
This is when a visual, a verbal podcast isn't as useful as a visual one.
Yeah, well, I can put pictures on. I can put pictures up.
I've got the basics, the bones of what you would see eventually end up as books. So
wow, so they're all sketches. Julia's showing me some sketches here.
Really quick scribbles that get yes or no, and then they get refined.
I see. Some more detail added.
Scanned into my computer, and then they eventually get coloured and edited, and they find their way further down the system. And then, so all the artwork for something at Evergreen Street actually lives in one of the books up there. So you could see all the initial sketches. And it's a very gentle, slow process, a very organic process. And you share every section of it with a group of people that go, yes, no, bigger, smaller, fatter, thinner, and everything in between. And I like particularly working with America. They have a different set of behavioral patterns, let me say, that perhaps we don't have in the UK and Europe. In the UK, I get a lot of feedback like, it's really lovely. It's really lovely. It's really nice. But tell me what's wrong with it. In America, they'd go, yeah, move it to the right. It's not big enough. It's, I need to be more blue. And I go, perfect. I like to be told what to do. I'm not sensitive or upset about it. Just tell me what I need to do. And it works really well for me. So I spend most of my time working in America now.
And how do you find that then? Obviously, living here and the difference in time zones. Is it, you were saying earlier that you quite like having that that leap ahead?
Yeah, I like. Sometimes I can get calls at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night saying, can you jump on a call? Can we send over some tweaks? And that's usually fine. A couple of nights a week, I'll work to that time anyway in the studio. If I've had dinner and I've had a bath and a glass of wine, it's not so conducive. But there are those boundaries there. They know that, I'm here in the UK, and they are really respectful of it. So I've never had a time when that's ever been a problem, but I do feel like a superhero that I've got it all done before they're even awake. It's in their inbox. It makes me feel so good knowing I'm like, you want it, you've just woken up and it's there waiting for you. So it is awesome living in the future.
Yeah. And have you found with working in America, the themes that you were saying before, you kind of get a feel for different themes that are coming through that people need right now? Obviously, there's been huge amounts of change in America. It's been a massive cultural shift, and that's obviously filtering down into the younger generations, because it's something that they need to know about it and need to be aware of and need to be brought up in a different way, in a different environment to deal with these things that are coming through.
Absolutely. We are the zeitgeist. We are the, everything filters right down to the very, very basics, to the point where we've got board books for babies, my first protest book. And
really?
Absolutely. And speak up your voice and be heard. And, political and religious and economic, trends, all of those filter down to where we are now. There was a particular book in America that was banned in quite a lot of states, just purely because it was about a little boy that wanted to wear a dress. Nothing more, outrageous than that. And so we've still got a lot of work to do. We've still, but what we do is not just entertaining, it is educational too. And hopefully with the voices that we speak up with bravely, and we encourage brave, independent talking, that hopefully we will be able to hear the voices that are unrepresented and make people visible that haven't been before. So I feel a real sense of responsibility with my job and what I do and how I do it. On the surface, it just might look that we make pretty things, but on another level, the responsibility that comes with what we're creating is huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's books that I've read with Hugo again that it's, at some points I've been almost in tears, and I've been having to really like rein my emotion in when I've been reading it, so they can still enjoy the book and not look around and go, huh? What's wrong with me? There's the book, I don't know if you read them, the Rabbit and Bear books. Yeah. And it's the one about I think it's called Attack of the Snack, and they imprison this little owl because they think it's this big horrible owl that's going to eat them, and this little owl's in this tree trunk prison, and it's like, have I done something wrong? And I'm like, oh my god, no, you haven't done anything wrong, you're fine.
A subliminal layer of the psychology between cultures battling, and
yeah.
I mean, I look at the news every day. I look at the world news, and I see it as snapshots. I mean, there was something not so long ago that George, I think it was the loneliest bird in the world.
Oh.
And then there was the oldest tortoise in the world that just passed away. And every single time I see these stories, I'm like, floods of tears. I've written a new book, and George and the loneliest tortoise and the loneliest bird find each other and start a little colony of the loneliest people. And that's where all these seeds come from. I see trends on social media, particularly about, and actually the negative things can be brought in and help me create stories too. So the bullying and the mean and the name calling, and and calling out to anybody who is slightly different than anybody else. And now I understand how the world works in publisher and literature. It's very difficult to go anywhere really and not see a narrative that almost needs to be told.
It is a very, I guess I hadn't really thought about it as an illustrator and an author, that like you're saying, the responsibility you have is huge to be able to translate and visualize those trends that are coming down, and those messages that need to be put out there, because it's really important that our young children are seeing those and seeing them in a positive way, not just seeing what trickles down and filters down from their parents or their friends or what's on the news, because they will get snippets of what's on the news. It's Julia, how do you deal with that responsibility?
Well, once a year we go to Bologna, like we say, in Italy, and you see the world's publishing under one roof, and you see trends, you see styles, you see different countries represented in different buildings, and you can pick up on their cultural specialities, their unique selling points, how magical they are, what's going on in Korea, what's going on in Iran and Scandinavia and South America. And you see it all together, and when you see it like that, you not only understand where you fit into it, but you understand where your voice is and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that affirmation is really solidifying for any creative, and it's a really important place to be. I used to go for 1 or 2 days, but now the relationships, like I said earlier, are really important too. So we now go for about a week, leave the children with whoever will have them, and we have the most loveliest time ever. But obviously, because the last 2 years it hasn't gone ahead, so maybe this time next year we will see. I remember the first year, actually, there was a real anger that had arrived inside publishing, and it was like, goodness, what on earth is this? We were still happily talking to singing frogs and things like that, and then all of a sudden there was this outrage about groups of people being marginalized and their voices being quietened, and there was this absolute outrage that was sort of suddenly sprouted up in literature and picture books. And the only analogy I can sort of put it down to is have you ever heard of the Aesop's fable, where the sun and the wind are having this battle, and the wind's saying to the sun, I'm so much stronger and powerful than you. You know, I can, for example, there's a gentleman walking along the road here and he's wearing a big winter coat. I'm going to take that coat off before you can. And the sun's like, right, go ahead. And the wind's blowing and blowing and blowing, use all the force that he's got. And the gentleman pulls the coat much tighter and harder around him. It was, and then all the sun had to do is just gently shine, and the gentleman took his coat off. So it was coming from America, all of this anger and this marginalization. And actually what happened was the complete opposite. Everybody came together and stood up and went, we're not having any of this, and actually it had the complete opposite effect. From marginalizing the groups, they found their voice and they went, enough's enough, and they stood up and vocalized and marched and protested and screamed and shouted. And yes, this last few years has been really interesting, but those things have been a celebration of those voices as well, which is remarkable to see.
It's brilliant to see. It's great.
Isn't it?
It is. And I mean, that's you've obviously built up your career and nurtured these relationships with your sort of your art directors, the publishing houses, and other professionals, because I'm assuming, being a freelancer, you need that community around you to bounce ideas off and to discuss the things that are important within your areas of work, like the themes that are coming through. How do you find, how easy or difficult do you find that, keep maintaining those relationships, working in an environment where you're not in a building together or not always seeing each other every day?
Sometimes there are genuine language barriers. Sometimes there are communication barriers. But more often than not, we're talking about something that exists between the two of us, that is the common ground. And when you're working on something like that, all of those things tend to, yes, there will be mistakes. There's been many mistakes before. I mean, I was working with an art director and we were looking at the same spread. And she said, can you add some mums in there for me? And I went, how many do you want? And she went, okay, let's put 6 in there. So for the rest of that day and the next day, I was busy drawing mums with kids and pushchairs, bags of shopping and all sorts. And I sent it back to her and she went, there are no mums here, but why have you put all these other, mums in there with children? And basically what she'd said to me was that they call this particular chrysanthemum, they call them mums in America.
Oh.
So all she wanted was a collection of plants put in there. And I'd gone away and drawn all these mums and kids. And she now tells it as a story, is, quite hilarious. I mean, they thought it was hysterical. I was like, I've just wasted 2 days. But those are the problems that happen. But I don't know, we all have a common goal and we all want to get there, and we all tend to have the same kind of sensibilities. And actually, we always have a really, really good time doing it. So these things tend to be reasonably easy to produce and easy to work with. I can't think off the top of my head if I've ever had a moment where I've worked with somebody that has been difficult. I was asked that question actually when I went for my interview at the university. Have you ever had a situation where you've become, you've not been able to conflict, you've not been able to resolve? And I sat there for ages thinking, and they were like, well, and I say, well, you know what? I don't think I do. I think creative people always find a way to circumnavigate problems and see it as, an adventure. So no, the people I work with and the establishments it is a joyous place to be. I'm very, very lucky.
But do you think there's a downside to anything that you do?
My ridiculous enthusiasm has me chasing my tail sometimes. And now over this last year, I've been having some PTSD trauma counseling, and it's made me very aware that when I'm overworked, I'm overwhelmed, and when I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, and when I'm anxious, I'm stressed, and when I'm stressed, I'm terrified. And all of those things come right back down to, ironically, I've got a picture on the wall just behind you saying, put yourself first. I mean, I might look at that once or twice a day, and really it's time management and looking after myself and taking care. I love looking after my family, and because I work from home, I'm always thinking, well, I'll tidy up the breakfast things. I've just put a load of washing on. You know, I'm actually in my studio looking out at all the washing out there that now has been rained upon, and I've frosted dinner. So it's just overloaded. That's the thing that can bite me on the backside, and that's the thing that I need to be mindful of.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been reading up about the cat's here. Hello. I've been reading up about something called compassion-based therapy, and part of that is, you know, you've got your soothe system, you've got your drive system, and your threat system, and at any given time you will be in one of those, but they all need to work in equilibrium. So you could be threatened by not knowing where your next paycheck is coming from, and that will put you into your drive system. And you can often go between the threat and the drive, but you also need that soothe. Yeah, it is. But you also need that soothe in there to help you create that equilibrium where you can function in all three effectively. So you're not just chasing your tail between two of them. So that's interesting.
I find it very difficult to relax. I find it very difficult to switch off. I find if my husband and my children weren't around, I would just completely work myself into the ground. I just keep going. And the only time I do stop is when the baths run, or I'm called for movie time, or it's dinner time, and that to me is my biggest learning curve, and still something I don't know any creative who's found the ultimate balance, but trying to fix that and be mindful of that moving forwards is something that I'm really trying to work on.
Yeah, I think it's something that I think needs to be instilled from an early age, doesn't it? Just make it, like you were saying, like you say to your students, you know, look after yourself, take breaks, take your own medicine.
I do actually find it very amusing when I'm sitting there going, oh, you're working way too hard. You've taken far too much on. You should have said no to that project. And, you know, you've written yourself a schedule. I mean, the ridiculous things that sometimes I come out and say, they help other people, but I don't take any of my own advice.
What advice would you give to any students who are either school age or coming out of university right now and not entirely sure where they're meant to be going? What advice would you give to them if they're wanting to go into the creative industries or follow even into your footsteps and go towards illustration?
I tend to say to my students, and I've been in schools and primary schools, secondary, you know, further education, higher education, and I tend to ask the same two questions, like I said earlier. What do you really love and what are you really good at? And somewhere between those two, there is a crossover of those two circles. And the first thing I really try to do is encourage people to do the things that they love and what makes them happy. Sometimes they've spent so long doing things that they don't enjoy that they actually really don't know what does make them happy and what they do enjoy doing. Sometimes I do quite quick workshops with people to do quite sort of silly and ice-breaking exercises, and they tend to be just to illuminate those areas for individuals. I've also followed my own pathway. The advice that I've been given over the years, I've asked for it and listened to it, but I've not always taken it. You know, when I was at college, I was said, don't apply to that university, you'll never get in there. Nobody's ever got in there. And to me, that was a firecracker. It was like, well, that was a real, I'm going to go and do it. And, you know, when I was at university, they said, I really don't think children's picture books are for you. Go and do something else. And it was like, I'm going to prove to you. So I've always used, advice like that as a firecracker to inspire me. But I also do see lecturers and mentors and people giving out advice. And when they do, individuals that are of student age, regardless of what age they are, they tend to take it as the truth. So when you're told that perhaps you shouldn't do that or go there or try that, they can be exceptionally powerful, sticky words. And individuals their lives and their choices have been really manipulated by the advice that they've been given out. So I tend to be very, very careful about the advice that I give out. I'll encourage students, but at the end of the day, it was like, what do you think you should do? And always to encourage them not to be afraid of trying. Trying and failing, like I said before, is not failing. It's just not working out. It's not that particular pathway. Keep going and keep trying another way and keep doing it. And have that belief in yourself that some of the biggest lessons I've ever learned have been the mistakes that I've made, the wrong pathways I've taken. And they've helped me become the person that I am. So making a mistake sometimes is super brilliant for a creative.
It's always good with hindsight, isn't it, as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been many times when I've had, tears in the studio on my own, doubting myself, but it tends to be quite short-lived because the nature of the business is quite fast-paced. So you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself for 5 minutes, but you really need to sort of get up and get on with it, as in you can't spend that long worrying too much about everything. That said, I worry about everything all the time.
You just got to keep going forwards, though.
Yeah. And I always ask my students, if I had £1 million and could give you your dream job right now, what would it be? And I don't tend to get many people going, oh, I'm just going to sit on a desert island drawing. They tend to think for the first time the possibilities of them having a viable, successful business, and what could that be? Usually they go away and don't have much to say at the time, but they'll come back, a little while later and go, yeah. And for the first time, they visualize themselves in what they thought before was the impossible. And to see them then think, well, I now have this amazing goal that I'd not even dreamed to have before, because nobody's asked me that question before. I've now got something to work towards. And the only reason I do that is because somebody asked me that once. And I was like, that is an amazing question. What do I want? What is the ultimate I could do with my skill sets?
And it's good to make them think about it, because then they can realize where their strengths are.
And why possibly the things that they're doing aren't working out, where their strengths are, where their enjoyment is, and how do I get from here to there? Because usually it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. It's about angling and focusing and joining your skill sets.
And you need people like you there to help just shift the course a little bit and help guide them in the direction that they can go in, but they need the confidence and they need that, like you said, that little push sometimes.
Yeah, and be very careful with that power. We've had individuals that have come and given, critiques and portfolio tutorials to students, and they've said, "Oh no, this isn't very good, and you're not going to make it in the industry, and you're not good enough, and this is rubbish, and that's rubbish." And I've known creatives that have come to me years after and said, I've not put pen to pencil for 3 or 4 years because of that experience. And to me, that's the power and the responsibility that they have, passing those words on and having such huge impact on other creatives in early stages of their career. I find it, it just breaks my heart. There's always something to be found, a seedling hiding somewhere to be watered and nurtured, always.
And students, they always do remember the teachers that they felt like they got the most positive experience from. But on the flip side, that I know that there are students who will remember the ones that really put them down, and there will be those like seminal moments where a comment will have destroyed them, and the teacher won't have noticed, won't have realized. Like I was told when I was doing A-level art that I can't draw faces. so I shouldn't try. I should draw something else. And I was like, oh, right, okay then, right.
And can you imagine in any other business saying that you can't do that very well? So instead of trying and overcoming it and practicing it, like football, for example.
Yeah.
Let's not go down the rugby route.
No, we could be here for a long, long time if we did that, Julia. I think the other halves would come in and they'd be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what? Trying to kick a goal and not getting it right. Imagine a coach coming to them and saying, you're not very good at that, don't do that again. No, but like I've watched Johnny Wilkinson kicking at a post and actually hitting the post every single time in practice, 1,000 times. So that piece of advice is really sort of contradictory to the entire world of learning. The pedagogy of that is just doesn't seem to have any founding in any growth mindset.
Yeah. And it was just that really blunt delivery of like, you can't draw faces.
Yeah.
And there was no like follow up. It's like, okay, so what should I draw? It was like wander off to the next student, tell them they shouldn't draw flowers because they're rubbish at that as well. And there's a change. There is a change in education, and the teachers that are teaching now are much more informed, because after that particular teacher was quite old, and she was from a different generation, and not that excuses her behaviour.
Teaching and learning methodologies have evolved, and it's not only an intellectual process that's changed, it's an emotional process that's changed. We no longer bully our subordinates or our students, or put them down to get a rise out of them. I mean, everybody's motivation is so very different. Mine is, if you tell me something I can't do it, by tomorrow morning it'll be on your desk.
Yeah, you want to do it more.
Yeah, and it's completely and utterly stubborn. Like I said, I must be a terribly irritating puppy to my parents and everybody, because people don't tend to say I can't do something now, because it would just be, okay, so what's my next goal? What do I want to be doing in the next 5 or 10 years? Tell me I can't do it and I'll have it done. Yeah. But it's quite exhausting.
I think, I can imagine it is. Well, we'd love to have you come and do a workshop at the storyboard. Like, I don't know, even just have you to come and talk to a group of people. That would be amazing. When we're allowed to do things like that again, we might try and, I don't know, get an outdoor marquee or something set up where we can have some people come do some sort of creative festival. I think that's what it has to be called now. It's not like one thing, it's just a creative festival of some sort. There you go, guys, heard it here first. Creativecast, creative festival. It'll happen.
Tell me, we'll make it do. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. So one last thing before we finish off. You talked a little bit earlier about the book that you're writing. Tell us more about that.
It was commissioned as part of a 2 or 3 book deal with Bonnier Press Templar Books, which was commissioned and taken to acquisitions by 2 very dear people that I work with, Katie and Genevieve, the editor and art director of that publishing house. And I took my big book of stories down to see them, and they saw number 7 Evergreen Street and saw what it could be. Without them, the team, that would have been nothing. They made it as amazing as it could be. It was a very much a collaborative effort. And The Fixer of Broken Things is the next one I'm working on. So that will be out next January. And there is a little secret something that's coming after that as well, which I've written and formulated, but there are no visuals to accompany it just yet. So that's a little seedling to be watered. Oh,
well, can't wait for that to come out. We'll definitely be getting it, because Hugo loves number 7 Evergreen Street. He really enjoys it. I think it's a really fascinating book for him, because there's so many things to look at in it. And he loves it. I love the story behind it. Whether he's quite taken it in yet, I don't know. We'll have to read it a few more times to him, I think.
They decided which flat he wants to live in, which individual.
He likes the ship.
Yes, I mean, the ship is quite exciting. I am torn between the ship and Tanika-san, because she makes origami birds. There's a whole new story just about her and the birds that she sends out, because she writes messages on the inside of them.
Oh, that's lovely.
And she's going to the top of a building all of her own. But from the top of her building, she can see birds' eyes of everybody else, and she can see into other people's worlds. And she uses her origami birds to help people.
That sounds amazing. We actually saw there's some steppy stones in Morpeth, and we saw a family with a little one who were actually releasing little, not birds, but the little boats, the little paper boats onto the river. And I was like, isn't that a beautiful thing to do with your little one? Or just even as a grown-up, put your little wish in a boat, send it off down the river.
We went for a walk the other day with some friends, and we were at some wetlands looking out, and I saw this little thing out the corner of my eye. There was a sort of metal structure where you could look through, and on the top of it, in a really strange place, was this little thing, and I thought, that's really odd. So I climbed up and had a look at it, and it was the most amazing, beautiful painted stone, and it got written on it, "I'm super special, you found me, but hide me again so somebody else can find me."
Aww.
And it said on the bottom of it, "You're special." And it was just goodness. And somebody had just spent some beautiful time with their children drawing these beautiful pebbles and leaving them out in the wilderness for people to find, spread a little bit of joy. Really
nice, really lovely. Oh, well, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been really, really interesting talking to you. I'd love, this could go on forever. I feel like a lot of my interviews I could talk. Yeah, we could just talk and talk and talk about the creative things that we love doing, and just creativity in general. It would be amazing to do that. But so it'd be lovely to do this again with you, maybe and have a different topic area to talk about as well. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the Storyboards Creativecast. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date with all our latest information and events. Why not subscribe to our YouTube channel as well? You can also email us at info.thestoryboard@gmail.com.